we're ready when you are.
Okay. All right. Well, what time do we have? It looks like 2 minutes after 11, so we'll call the meeting to order.
Come on, be official.
Okay. All right, and everyone is here, so let's call the roll.
Okay. Chair Kokovis,
Here.
Vice Chair Clark.
Here.
Board Member Goosh,
Here.
Board Member McBride,
Here.
and Board Member Stanley.
Here.
Okay. And Miss Mary, you're taking care of everything for us. So, let's rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And has everyone had an opportunity to read the minutes?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, can I get someone to move to approve?
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
I will second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That passes.
We do have advisory board oaths. Item number 1 on the agenda, we'd like to go ahead and do an oath for all the board members. For a new year, it's just been some time.
Okay, can you direct us through
And-
that? What are we doing?
Do you all have the oath, for the record, Lee Baggett, City Attorney? You do not have a copy of
Now,
it?
if you read it and have them.
All right, I'll have to do short version. So if y'all will stand and raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, and then state your name,
Aye.
am qualified under the Constitution,
I'm qualified under the Constitution,
laws of Florida,
laws of Florida,
and the Code of Ordinances for the City of Stuart, Florida,
and the Code of Ordinances of the City of Stuart,
to serve as a member
serve as a member
of the Stuart Independent Review Board,
of the Stuart Independent Review Board,
and that I will well and faithfully
and that I will faithfully
perform the duties
perform the duties
of an advisory board member
of an advisory board member,
on which I'm about to enter, so help me God.
on which I am about to enter.
so help me God.
Thank you. May be seated.
Thank you.
I will have the oaths for you to sign after.
Okay, great. Any comments from the public? Seeing none. Any comments from the board members? Okay, so our action items, first one is the review of the citizen complaint by Susie Hetherington against Officer Wakefield.
Chair, may I also mention, we have the annual board reorganization. If you'd like to do that after the items, we can do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
We good?
Has everybody had an opportunity, or you're gonna review it first, Chief, right?
I will review if the board, pleasure of the board, however you want to do it. Okay. So just a little bit of history as to why we haven't been here is, since I've been chief of police for 6 years now, give or take, we had minimal complaints against officers, which is a very good thing. So I kind of held on to these, so we had at least more than one. So you'll notice that one of them, the one that I'm about to go over, happened back in 2023 in August. So if something major comes up, obviously, I will certainly bring it to the board. But starting with the complaint against Officer Heitfeld, this complaint was filed against Officer Heitfeld back in August 25th of 2023. As in your packet, you can see the complaint form. During this complaint, Ms. Hetherington, who resides within the city of Stuart and on Astor Lane, was complaining that Officer Heitfeld was rude to her while he was conducting an investigation regarding, and both of these cases involve HOAs. So there's some tricky laws within HOA, common areas, who owns what. So Officer Heitfeld was dealing with essentially a neighbor problem. And what happened was that a person came in to complain, and Hetherington, Miss Susie Hetherington, was the person of interest who was essentially messing with some patio furniture in a common area of the property. So during the conversation, Officer Heitfeld did call Miss Hetherington. During that time, she was spoken to about the incident, and his ultimate goal was to go and trespass her from that location. However, the Sergeant Basio, intervened in that incident and said, no, we're not doing that because it's an HOA. It's kind of, not necessarily the right thing to do because it's a common area. So while on the phone with Ms. Hetherington, Officer Heitfeld is having a conversation with her. And as preface this first, as police officers, we have to deal with the public all the time. Inherently, it's always a negative contact with a police officer most of the time. You're getting a ticket, whatever the case may be. So during this time, we have to have patience with people. And I can tell you that during this incident, Officer Heitfeld lost his patience with Ms. Hetherington. And during the conversation, he actually hung up on her. And I feel that's very unacceptable to do. And in your packet as well, you do have, I usually write a memo on it, but I agreed immediately with the findings of the sergeant to write him up with a letter of counseling. So ultimately, this was all caught on video. He hangs up on her, which I believe is unacceptable. He did receive a letter of counsel, shift level, and documentation of appraisal notes for this incident. And that's how it was resolved at my level, and it was moved forward to City Manager Mortel for comment. And I believe he did agree with me on my findings on this case against Officer Heitfeld. And that's all I have. If I can answer any questions if you have them as well.
And as I recall, what we have to do is agree with how it was handled.
Yes, sir.
Yes, ma'am, and just as a clarification, Mike Mortel for the record, I did read the report, and I do agree with the chief's assessment. And it's interesting because the Citizens Review Board is designed to provide a transparency and to make sure that there's some oversight in making sure, because as staff, we develop relationships with the officers, and for example, both officers in this case, but in particular for the first one, Officer Heitfeld, I've been working with for over 10 years, and he's actually a really a great cop, so to speak, and he was last year was selected to be the new K-9 officer because of his accomplishments, and as a result, sometimes we get blinders or what it might be and have a tendency to let things overshadow it. But I agree with the chief that it doesn't matter if somebody's good, bad, or indifferent. There's never a circumstance that a city employee can hang up the phone. Even if they're screaming at you and saying bad things, you work for the government, and if you choose to work for the government, that's part of it, and you've got to be prepared for that. And I think the chief counseled him appropriately, and he gets it, and he understood it. But like the chief said, there really is no excuse for that. The good news is that while that was rude and inappropriate, it wasn't something that caused any harm to anybody or didn't do anything that would be, considerably worse. And fortunately, this has been a learning and teaching moment, and it hopefully will never happen again.
Well, I personally, when you deal with HMOs, it's very, very difficult.
HOAs.
HMOs too.
Oh,
They're not as funny either. There's a
Yeah, I
problem
mean,
with those too.
when I was working as a caregiver, it was a shock to me. And that's why when Bob wanted to sell the house and move into one, I said, over my dead body. Because no way I would put up with this. So I commend the officer. I understand what happened, but he needs all of our all of us need training when we go into those situations.
Right.
I agree, and I think reactivity, I think we've had this conversation many times in the past at many of these meetings, is working with our law enforcement on reactivity and how to take a breath. And yes, this was more educational than circumstantial, which is a great thing, and it's very frustrating working with an HOA. I belong to one, and it's yank, 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 and I have some hairs that are missing. But what's important to me is that with my career and what I do, that apology was given, a personal apology. And I don't know if I read that in here, but I do believe being hung up on, I don't care what happens, what circumstance, who it is, whether it be my kid, my neighbor, my whatever, it feels horrible. And even just if the guy set the phone down and went and walked somewhere else and said the last two words that she said, okay, well, I hear that you're frustrated because this was done. Okay, he didn't have to hear it. And we all know being hung up on it's so painful.
It's a slap in the face.
It is, it's a slap in the face. And you call this person and everyone's tempers are raised. So I guess I would just, and I didn't read it in here that an apology was given to Mrs. Hetherington. And I do think it's, whether it's, 2003 or 23 or whatever, it still means something, for him to call and just say, you know what, we're all in this frustrated situation. I know it's been a few years, but I've thought about it, and I'd really appreciate if you'd allow me to apologize and hopefully assist you in the future in a better and deserving way, because I'm here for you. Because sometimes that's all it takes. And it's simple.
And I get that, and I agree with that. However, from the standpoint of local government, does that put us in a position of liability for an officer to call up and say, I mishandled this, or I want to apologize?
I don't think it's a
That would be my only concern.
I don't think it's a liability as much as an empathetic.
Oh,
I don't know.
okay, I'm
But
right
yes,
there with
I
you.
agree with you. We don't want to get in trouble for saying sorry.
right.
I don't want to jump
Right.
the attorney, but, an apology by Heidfeld is not a bad suggestion. However, he's already received his discipline for that issue.
Right.
So, I mean, it's kind of like,
Yeah.
It's
after
on
the
and
fact.
over with.
how would you?
Yeah, but this board doesn't have the
You're
right
right,
to.
you're right,
Doesn't
you're
have the
right.
right to tell us.
You're
what
right.
to do.
Correct.
Just
They can
You're right.
confirm or deny,
Suggestion.
but-
You're right, sorry.
But their comments can be taken into consideration from us. And like, the next time I see him, I plan to tell him what your consensus was, and that it wasn't just in passing, that it was unanimous, and that they affirmatively really felt strongly this way. And maybe on his own initiative, he can
That would be great,
heed that advice and do something about it.
right?
And to go further, the facts in this, the exposure is very minimal, just hanging up on someone. If it was a police brutality type case, totally different
Right.
Oh,
if you're concerned about liability.
This might be a courtroom.
And it is, again, and I get that. It's not, detrimental or anything like that, but I think we're all as human beings, and again, I'm not recommending anything, I'm just, because obviously we can't, but I'm just saying, if you had a neighbor that you don't like for 2 years, and she came up and say, hey, I'm just really sorry about this situation, I think they'd have more feeling towards our police officers and things like that, like, oh gosh, even 2 years, I was still given this opportunity to say. So that's just me. I always feel it, it's just a good place for forgiveness in the world, and Mike, that's how, I'm just giving my 2 cents, and
It's
But
a teachable moment for
it's a
humility,
te-
too.
It is, and I think everyone feels better in the long run, and if something happened and that police officer was there and she was there, it could go worse, just because an apology, I don't know, but we're hypothesizing, but I think everything that you did was the right thing to do. The counseling was good, hopefully, you did what you could do, and hopefully he was there and understood it and was empathetic.
I can tell you that the sergeant did intervene, and he did not trespass Ms. Hetherington. And if I'm not mistaken, Sergeant Bossia did go speak with Hetherington regarding this issue as well.
Right, right. I agree with the counseling that was done, and I think you took the right action.
Okay, so we're taking that as a motion?
I motion.
I second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. And our next one is the review of citizen complaint by Laverne Mullins against Officer Lee.
Again, for the record, Chief Joseph Tuminelli. This complaint by Laverne Mullins is on Officer Corey Lee. Another, as Mr. Mortel said, both of these officers are very good officers for the police department and have long tenure with the police department as well. This complaint was filed on January 11th by Laverne Mullins, again, an HOA issue. It has to do with Christmas decorations. So, the complaint is rudeness, off-putting behavior towards Ms. Mullins, and she's claiming racial overtones as well. During this call, Officer Lee was field training a new officer named Eric Lott. So the complaint was that Ms. Mullins was starting to take down, again in the common area, Christmas decorations, and the police were called about her actions. So what transpired during this incident is a little bit more than the previous one, to where an actual arrest was made on Ms. Mullins. So I'm going to go into a little bit of criminal law. As a police officer, you need probable cause to arrest somebody. That means 51% that I believe that you committed, have committed, or about to commit a crime. So a court system needs 100%, which is called proof beyond a reasonable doubt. So the officer has a lot of discretion to where we can make an arrest or not. During this case, Officer Corey Lee did give Ms. Mullins a summons to appear in court. He did not handcuff her. He did not put hands on. He gave her a ticket to appear in court for criminal mischief for cutting the ties on the Christmas lights in this condo association, which is also in the city of Stuart. It's Park Square. The case was ultimately dropped, and the city attorney said it's petty. So on a legal basis, Officer Lee had the legal authority to arrest her because the criminal mischief did happen. Was it the best thing to resolve the situation? Apparently not, because we're sitting here today. He did resolve the situation by making the arrest. The state attorney's office did dismiss the charges on her. So she was not necessarily taken into custody or taken to jail. It's just like getting a traffic ticket, but she was required to go to court. And as you can see in your packet, they did dismiss the charges on her. During this, I assigned this to Lieutenant Michael Gerwin, my internal affairs investigator, and in the complaint and the overtones of the complaint, she was, I guess, implying that she was only arrested because of her color. She was a woman of color. So I didn't instruct Lieutenant Gerwin to go into our racial profiling policy and stuff like that. He took it upon himself to do this and completed the investigation, in addition to adding open transparency regarding how the Stuart Police Department treats all of its citizens, breaking it down by race and stuff like that, which I thought was very good. He did that on his own. I did not ask him to do that. So we added the racial bias allegations made by Ms. Mullins in that case. Could have Officer Lee not arrested her? Yes. Did he have the legal authority to do it? Yes. Was he doing it because she was a woman of color? No. So I agree, and this one I obviously did a memo on. I do agree with what Lieutenant Gerwin wrote to the investigation, emphasizing the fact that this was not a bias allegation. And if you read his report, he gives an overview of what the police department does on arrests, traffic citations. And overwhelmingly, there's no disparities amongst, I mean, it's pretty well spread out. I reviewed this, and I don't think, I should say, I concluded that there was no basis for a complaint. I think Officer Lee could have handled it possibly differently, instead of, giving her a ticket to go to jail, but based on the Stuart Police Department policy, law, I don't think he had any violations, and I unfounded this case, based on the officer's actions, based on the lieutenant's investigation, and based on what I also saw as well. So,
Any comments?
I have some questions on a little bit. So what happened is Officer Lee, who's new to the,
No.
he's not late.
How long has he been on the force?
I thought he was a trainee.
That's a question you'd have to ask the chief, but.
Oh, he's in
Officer
training
Lee-
somebody else. I'm
Yes.
sorry,
He was
Officer
training somebody
Lyons.
else.
Thank you.
Okay. And this all goes to the fact that she was taking down Christmas decorations.
Well, so if briefly, I'll tell you what happened.
I've read it, but it's still.
Two neighbors. One lady wants to put Christmas decorations up. She goes to the board of the association and says, hey, can I put Christmas decorations up on the railings? They grant her permission to do so. She purchases or owns Christmas lights and puts them up on the railings. Her neighbor, who doesn't like the Christmas lights for one reason or another, instead of going to the association and complaining about it, takes it on her own initiative to decide to take those lights down and decide that they're not allowed to be there, and takes the lights down without permission. Essentially, I mean, it's not really stealing because she wasn't intending to remove them from the ownership of the other person, but she was, taking down, if somebody went onto your property and took down your Christmas lights without your permission, you would be upset, right? And that's what happened. The neighbor took them down. She took the position that, I took those down because you're not allowed to put them up, even though the person that put them up had permission to put them up.
And I think she damaged some of them.
And yeah, when pulling them down, some of them were damaged. And Corey's involvement was to go there and, again, try to get two neighbors to not be angry at each other during Christmas. And the lady that filed the complaint accused Corey of siding with the other lady because of the color of her skin. And it had absolutely no relationship to the call. It had no relationship to what happened. And what Corey did was address it of, look, you criminal mischief or trespassing, that lady didn't have permission to take down those lights. If it had been the association that put up the lights, or if it was the tenant or the person living there that put up the lights, it didn't matter who it was. The lady that took them down did not own them and did not have authority to take them down, period. There is no circumstance. When Corey gave the notice to appear to the lady that took him down, he didn't arrest her or handcuff her like the chief said. Just, look, this is a criminal mischief. You're vandalizing, essentially. And it'd be like if someone took the Christmas tree down in front of, the city puts up a Christmas tree and the thing over here, and somebody took it down because they didn't like it. They don't have the right to do that. They'd need to come to the board first and express their concerns. What that lady should have done is gone to her board and said, hey, I use that railing or that common area, and I can't walk down the stairs because the lights are interfering with my ability, if that was the circumstance or whatever it was, instead of taking it upon herself to do it. When Corey gave the notice, he didn't care one way or the other if the state attorney prosecuted her for it. He was just following the guidelines. He alleviated the problem right then and there and got it over with. A couple weeks later, a state attorney looks at it and is like, am I really going to prosecute some lady for taking down Christmas lights? He dismisses the case, and once the case was dismissed, the lady who received the citation filed the complaint against Corey and made it a racial dispute, and I can't tell you what her motive is or isn't, but, you know, I think it was in the chief's report, it looks like someone that would be setting up a claim. And so, you know, that is what, you know, quite frankly, I didn't care what the motive was. I read it, I looked at it to see if there was any possibility that she could have felt like he was being racist in any way, and if there was any indication that he swayed one way or the other because of something of that nature. And it was really a non-event. I mean, the truth of it was, lady put up Christmas lights, she had permission to do so from the board, her neighbor took them down, she called the police because her lights were gone. The police told the person that took them down, of course it wasn't, you know, the person that took them down was not friendly about it, she was, you know, frustrated, and he said that, you know, it's against the law, you can't just go tear other people's property down. And so he gave her a citation for criminal mischief. It had nothing to do with her race, religion, age, any protected class whatsoever. It was that she admitted that she did it, and that was it. And so the reason that Corey didn't receive any reprimand or punishment is because he followed the procedures, he issued the citation, which is what he should have done. I mean, could you imagine if he had actually arrested her for taking those Christmas lights down? We'd be standing here going, that's not reasonable. A reasonable society would not arrest the neighbor for taking down the lights, even though they got damaged. The appropriate thing to do was to just give the citation and say, you know what, that's not my job, a state attorney or somebody else is gonna address this, and move on. And that's exactly what he did.
I thought she was arrested. It ended in
She didn't go to jail, she was issued a notice to appear.
in court. And and then it was all dismissed, but then she came back after she got her way of dismissal.
And once the state
and
attorney dismissed it.
had a further
she-
with the.
Well, that, and of course, that further issue that she did afterwards,
The racial,
no, it wasn't any racial, that was between her and the lady, like there was some damage and bleach poured and stuff like that. We can't prove she did that. It was, what she said was that when Corey wrote her that ticket, he didn't listen to her, and he did it because she was black. It wasn't because she took down the lights, it wasn't because the person called the police to make a police report that her lights had been taken down. It was that Corey took it on his own initiative to somehow do this because of a racial motivation. And there was zero evidence to indicate that that occurred.
I have a question for Lee. When the state attorney decided not to file through with the case, did she still have to appear in court?
It depends on when the dismissal was. Sometimes it could be in court.
Well, I was
But-
wondering why she said she had to pay a lawyer. I mean, if it was dismissed and nobody showed up in court,
Right,
why
I'm
would you
not,
pay a lawyer?
I'm not like noticed of the criminal case, but maybe you know, I don't.
I can tell you when
Alright.
it was dismissed
I'm curious.
in
how it-
relation to that.
It can be dismissed at any time by the
Yes.
prosecutor. I don't
So-
know when it was.
So, for instance, if the court date is today.
Yeah.
I could receive a letter, because it's 30 days from the arrest, so the court date is within 30 days. I could receive a letter saying that my case was dropped and I would have to go to court. I'm just trying to look at the document. It should be in there of when, the day it was dismissed.
While he's looking, this is kind of akin to receiving traffic citation. You can appear to court, fight it, or pay the points or whatnot. That's kind of, there was no arrest and handcuffing. It's here, I'm citing you for this, and
But
here's your day in court.
it does
But-
require a court appearance.
Right.
does it stay in her record?
Yeah, you can't pay off points or, like,
If she was convicted
But it was
of the
dismissed, so there's
misdemeanor, would
nothing
be
on
on
her
her
record
record.
either.
But it was dismissed, so there's nothing on her record and it goes away.
But,
So-
you know, like I'll use myself. If I got the ticket and I thought I was innocent, I don't think I'd hire a lawyer. I'd go and I'd explain it to the judge. But that's the way I was taught to do things. So but I mean, to retain a lawyer, just,
The other side to it is I don't think there's any dispute that she damaged the lights and took them down. I mean, if she actually went to trial, she'd be found guilty. I mean, all the elements of criminal mischief had occurred. It was just that the state attorney rightfully recognized that escalating two neighbors over Christmas lights, if he prosecuted her for that, it would have ended up worse, right? Over time, that animosity would have grown, and it would have turned into something worse. So the state attorney, balancing judgment, said, look, this has been de-escalated, the matter is resolved, I am not going to make these neighbors any worse off than they are with each other. Unfortunately, there is a second event that occurred, and I don't think there's a video or any specific evidence as to who did it or how it happened or what occurred, so no one's been charged with that.
So the way I read the court system, it's called CCIS. The arrest was made and filed on.
And the arrest is the citation.
The arrest is the citation. She, like I said, didn't go to jail. It was made on 12/4. Judge Steele set the trial, or set the arraignment date for January 4th, and actually the case was closed and dismissed 12/27, so a
Thank you,
week
that's what I wanted to know.
before she would have to even
Yeah,
appear
before
in
you-
court.
Before I had to, I always use myself.
And she filed this complaint on January 11th. So
Thank you,
that's after the
yeah,
fact.
I get it.
So I have a few questions.
Okay.
Are you finished? I'm sorry, I
Yes,
didn't mean to
ma'am.
interrupt you. So we're up here to determine what your consequences were. So for the first one, obviously, he went to counseling. For the second one, no punishment, no, it didn't result in any sort of,
We didn't find
enough
that he
need
did
for,
anything wrong.
okay?
If you as a board disagree with us, then you would actually have a motion to say, I motion that I did find that he acted in a racially motivated way, and here's why, and here's what I think happened. You can't issue a punishment one way or the other, but you could in fact, as a board, have a finding that we got it wrong, and that because of our relationship with them, or that our biases,
Right.
or whatever those might be, caused us to miss it, and therefore, you could in fact find it.
And then what happens after that occurrence? I mean, does it reopen his?
No, it doesn't change, because there's under the state law and the police officer's Bill of Rights, that case, it would be double jeopardy and it's closed.
Closed.
However,
So,
it would still be a record. The city of Stuart would have this document for anybody else, and if in fact this
This
lady
office.
wanted to continue pursuing a claim against the city for being discriminated against, this would be another piece of evidence that she could use in her civil litigation against the city to say, yeah, look, an independent review board even found that there was a racial basis for this.
and does this stay on the officer's record that, you know, no action was taken, but it was dismissed and, you know, everything was,
So,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean,
I'm just saying
everything,
if we
like, nothing
disagree-
goes away.
if we
This,
just-
this complaint will always exist against this officer, regardless of what you find. If you find that that you agree with us, the complaint doesn't go away. The
Right.
complaint still happened.
right, but if we find we don't disagree, or we disagree with you, it's just a disagreement in this file also, there's no circumstantial
Well, and the purpose,
change.
right, the purpose for it for us is that if you were to disagree with us, the code has you delineate the reasons why, and that would assist the chief and I in administering the city. And it would say to us, listen, Mike, you didn't think that was racially motivated, and these other residents of Stuart saw it in a different light. You need to look at it from a different perspective, and you need to pay closer attention because you're missing it.
Okay.
And, you know, you need to, and the same for the chief, and you need to, you know, personally, I would, you know, do things differently maybe, and I would, you know, go back and interview the neighbors, and I would go back and find out exactly what happened, and I would go back and do things because you found that. The reason I didn't find that it was racially motivated was because Corey had no reason to go there. He's just doing his job. He gets dispatched because the owner of the lights called the police because she was vandalized. He gets there, she says, I think it was so-and-so over here. He probably knocks on the door or whatever, investigates it, has words with the person that says, yeah, I vandalized it, I had the right to take those, I tore the lights down and threw them in the backyard or whatever I did. And he says, well, you don't have a legal right to do that. I have to issue a criminal mischief on you. She had the right to put up those lights because she had gone to the board to get permission. And I say to myself, well, if the woman that took down the lights was white or was Hispanic or was Jewish or Christian or whatever, would he have acted differently or would he have treated it any differently?
Right.
And my conclusion is, no. I mean, he technically could have arrested her, and in my mind, if he was racist or he wanted to be mean to her, that would have been the solution. If you really want to do something to bother somebody, put them in jail.
Right.
That works. But
And I'm just asking this
Right.
question because
But I'm just- right.
typically we always have where they've been to counseling, they did this. This is one of these cases
didn't-
where we've just
nothing
kind of let it
happened,
go. So I'm just wondering what the ramifications are if we decide different, because we've always decided, and I think what you did is right. I'm saying that, I'm not going with that, I'm just out of curiosity for future.
for what it's worth, I don't want to promote people to continue filing them because obviously we like it when there's none filed.
Right.
But at the same time, it actually helps me when we do have these filed because I have to slow down from my day-to-day stuff.
Right.
And I have to read through it and pay attention, and then I have to look and say, okay, well, did the chief of police follow the protocols? Like, did Corey's supervisor first investigate it, and then did his supervisor make sure, and then it'd go through, to the chief, right, and list the process of procedure I have to review, and then I have to go back at it and look at it from a perspective of the victim, which is the lady that called the police, but I also then have to go back and look at it from the perspective of the person making this complaint that was charged with the ticket, and regardless of what it are, whether it's this one or whether it's the one where the police officer hung up on somebody, it makes you slow down and it makes you think about stuff you need to remind other people about. And like the hang-up one, believe it or not, since I read that report, in passing, probably 6 times since I read that report, I've been in other departments and I've made the comment of, no matter what, we know not to hang up on anybody, just, or whatever the randomness is. So these
Situations.
hearings or whatever, they have an effect no matter what. Even if there's no changes, or even if you were to agree with us that there was no finding that there was a racial basis for it, to me, I really don't think there was a racial basis for it, but it also tells me that the lady who received the citation feels very strongly and is very sensitive to that issue. And whether there was one or not, she thinks there was. And what can we do to change that, to build that trust and to make it so that nobody thinks that it was. And whether it was or wasn't doesn't matter because the lady that wrote that report thinks it was. And so what can I do to fix that no matter what? And so each one of these things is a learning experience for us.
So this whole thing right now is the dismissal of the citation, but now we're on to a racial thing, and was the officer okay racially? Is that what we're working on right now?
The question before this
Because
board
right now, Mike,
is the complaint.
of the racial
is-
complaint, or
not-
the fact that she was
not the
taking down the
criminal mischief,
lights?
Not the lights, that's just what happened.
Okay, because I don't know, with being again HOA, my only question is I'm on the board of my HOA. Someone can come up to me and my board and my 2 other people on my board and say, is it okay if I put my lights up? Oh, I had a perfect thing. Is it, no one asked me, but if there was a real estate sign, they're not allowed at my HOA. She didn't ask she asked somebody who's on the board and put it up. There was no meeting, there
Right.
was no nothing, and it's not part of our HOA board, it's part of our bylaws.
Agreed.
And so if it's part of the bylaws that there's not supposed to be things in common area, and it's not a thing for
And
the
then-
HOA to approve, then she is not wrong
Well, except
to take them down.
She doesn't own them. Nobody has the right to just walk in and start taking the landscaping down if they think it
But
violates
no
the
one
bylaws.
has the right to put it up either if it's
Well,
not allowed by the bylaws.
That would be the question. If you were a resident and you saw something in violation,
Right?
you couldn't, if somebody's car was parked in somebody else's spot, you wouldn't call a towing company and have their car towed away. You'd go to the board and say that car's in the wrong place. You don't have the legal authority to take it upon yourself to make those decisions. You are supposed to go to the board to make that decision. In this instance, the lady that put up the lights actually did go to the board, to the meeting, got permission, and did have authority from the board to put the lights up.
Whether the bylaws said no.
Well,
Yes
the
or no.
bylaws don't, it doesn't say they yes or no, it's a common area, the board authorized it, it was allowed. The lady that was against it, if she doesn't have the authority to paint the railing a different color, she doesn't have the ability to take the lights down. If she didn't like the lights, her duty would be to go to the board and report it to the board. No individual of an HOA has the authority to do anything in a common area. The board is the only person that has authority in a common area. So when and again, this is my thing, I don't care if she had the right to take the lights down or not. That part doesn't matter. The Stuart police officer is called. He is given a set of facts. Based upon that set of facts, he made the decision that this particular woman removed the lights. As a result, that equals criminal mischief. The question before you is not whether she was guilty or innocent of that criminal mischief charge. The question is, did the Stuart police officer issue the citation because she was black? Or did he issue the citation because he thought she removed the lights without permission? And again, going back to the HOA, if the lady had the right to take the lights down or not, doesn't matter. If she had the right to take the lights down, then she took them down. Why did she damage them? I'm not sure. But again, the question is, when the officer issued the citation, he confirmed with the board that they had given her permission to put them up. He confirmed with her that they were her lights. He confirmed with the lady that took them down that no one gave her authority to take them down. And as a result, he issued, he's like, look, this amounts to criminal mischief. I can't do anything else about it. He issues the citation. Whether she get convicted of that or not doesn't matter to me under this circumstance, because the issue before us is, did this officer go there, and when a woman of color answered the door, did he then decide he was going to find her guilty of a crime?
Okay.
Or did he go there because somebody called for a criminal mischief complaint?
So this is not about the lights, this is
Right.
about if he
If it was
racially
based
was
on her
on
race.
race, okay.
Right.
Because I don't feel comfortable with the light situation, but I do feel comfortable with the fact that he wasn't being racially profiling because of it. So if it's a racial profile thing, then I agree that I don't think that there should have been any reprimand because he was doing his job with two individuals, whether they were, whatever color they were, then that's fine. I will motion to that, but I will not, I can't, I don't, if that's what we're motioning against. But if we're motioning against the light thing,
No, you're not touching the lights. And for what it's worth, I wish I could tell the Stuart Police, if the word common area comes across the phone, don't respond.
That's what I was.
Because
yeah,
there's always, the condo association common areas are
horrible.
always terrible. The point of it is the officers are trying to de-escalate it. That's all they're ever trying to do.
Right.
And in this instance, if he had said to the lady that took down the lights, sure, you can do that to anybody you want in the whole area, just go rip down everybody's Christmas ornaments, it probably wouldn't have had a good outcome.
right.
So what he was trying to do is get everybody to slow down and go back to the board and figure out how you're gonna move forward on this in the future, rather than authorizing one over the other.
Right.
And so my comment also would be, there's a common theme here, and these were both HOAs And could we do a tutorial for the officers, because it is very complicated? And I know each place has its own set of rules and regulations, but just kind of a general overview of like how things work, common areas and responsibilities.
Interestingly enough, Lieutenant Gerwin is actually the president of his HOA, so he knows the ins and outs. And if I can just chime in real quick, and I understand the concerns of, and Mr. Martell explained it very eloquently. If an officer, any officer with any tenure within my department makes an arrest based on race, color, creed, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Correct.
It would be termination. My job is to make sure they followed policy, law, and did it in a fair and impartial manner. And in this case, I believe he did.
And,
Okay.
and I should add, it's not on the record anywhere, but the chief has brought one of the captains with him to observe the proceedings. It doesn't matter what the outcome is. The reason for that is so that he can disseminate your guys' feelings, and like your comment about, you know, the HOA stuff. Z will be back at the police station making sure the rest of the staff gets the tenuous circumstances that arise under those, for sure, just from being here today, but he would have done that anyway.
Yeah, I think she's right with,
Right.
everyone's HOA is different, and if there's an
Yet they're all the same.
Oh, yes, they're all,
Yeah,
they all have them,
elements
they
are
all
the
have,
same.
yes, they all have that person, we all know who they are.
Kristen's
You know them
got
more than
laser.
most.
I have a statement, please.
Yes, ma'am.
My thought, as we talked about this, is her filing the complaint afterwards and saying race. You have black officers, am I correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So what if that was a black officer? Would she be filing a racial?
It's a relevant question.
It's funny you say that, Ms. Clark, because that's when I was looking at his report, and I said how I have to look at it from the eyes of the complainer and the eyes of, you know, everybody. One of the things I said to myself is, if Corey Lee, the officer that did it, if he was black or Hispanic or whatever, would he have done something differently? And the only thing that I could think of that any officer would have done differently is actually make an arrest. Because there was the legal basis, you could have made an arrest. I'm grateful that Corey didn't, because I would hate to think we were arresting somebody over Christmas lights like that. But if he did arrest them, it wouldn't have been, even then it wouldn't have been founded. But when I was, as Ms. Clark was pointing out, I thought to myself, well, what if one of the black officers had been responding to this? How would they have acted here? What would they have done here? And I said to myself, they would have issued a citation and just walked away from it. And that's exactly what Corey did. And that's one of the reasons I made the determination I made, that I didn't believe it was racially motivated.
And I think that's a great check mark with everything almost that you guys do every day is in this situation, because what would this person have done? And even if you need to bring in front of, you know, a white person, a black person, Hispanic officer and say, this is a circumstance that we have, how would you have handled this? And then have them write it down, put it in a file, and keep it for these sort of situations. We've talked to three of our best officers in different diverse backgrounds, and they all said the same thing. And you can tell this woman, and you can tell, you know, I mean, it's a great way to have a little backup and say, this is what we do at our department now. When this actually happens and we feel racial profiling is a thing, we can take our three people, three different, you know, diverse backgrounds, ask them how they present themselves, and see what the response is.
And as the chief said, if anybody got an indication that there was any racial profiling at all,
Of
it would
course.
be more than just asking three people in the department what they think. It would be hell on earth.
Right.
It would not be, I mean, there's a zero tolerance for it, especially in this day and age. You can't have somebody in your department that does that.
Right. Well, I think I've ruined most people's lunchtime, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to motion that I think that he did the right thing and made the right judgment. So I'm going to,
I second. All in favor?
all in favor, aye.
Okay, so, and we've got,
We do have to go back to item number 2, the board reorganization, the selection of chair and vice chair. It's a new year.
all right, do we have any nominations for chair?
I I think I would love to renominate you, Anita. I think you are fabulous and fantastic, and you look comfortable, you play the parts.
And I second it.
Gosh,
Thank you very much.
okay.
Thank you. And vice chair.
Girl,
I
did you do
nominate
it again?
Kristen
What?
for vice chair.
What? I would be happy to be vice chair.
Yeah.
That would be fine.
Madam Chair, you need to go back and vote on the chair
Oh, that's
first
true,
before you
too.
get to the vice chair.
We have a vote on the chair? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. And vice chair? All in favor?
I have the vice chair was, the nomination was by Board Member Goosh. Who
Yes.
seconded? Did we have a second?
Did you say, you seconded?
Yeah.
Or did you,
I thought I
Earl
did,
did.
I did. I thought
Yes.
we all seconded.
You can all second it. Only 1 second.
We'll go ahead and take a vote on that.
All in favor?
All in
Aye.
favor? Aye.
Okay. Thank you.
Is that both, or is it?
That is.
And
Right,
lastly,
so-
just before we adjourn, I know that we don't have regularly scheduled meeting, and I know that they come randomly. But I just want to say the city really, truly does appreciate you guys taking your time to volunteer and to show up for these hearings, because as you can see even from today, it really does help in the administration of the city, and it's an important role because it builds trust among the community to know that there's independent folks that do review these things and make sure that we're not going in the wrong direction or anything like that. So thank you for
Is this something that
participating.
they can come to, or are they not allowed to?
Anybody's allowed to
I mean,
attend.
these people could have come in.
Yeah, sure, it's
and-
open to the
They get-
public.
they
We
get
just don't
invited.
allow the introduction of new evidence
Right.
because it has to be based
Well, of
upon
course.
what was known at the time. But they could be sitting right here.
I just feel like if they're so hard,
They
I mean,
don't
that's,
care,
that,
right.
that says something to me, unfortunately, you know, but I don't know.
I do believe they receive a letter.
Oh,
that
yeah,
the
they get
hearing-
notice of it.
I don't know why we're in 2023 still, though. That's the only thing that's been with me.
That's because I'm trying not to.
She may
get
not
old.
live here, we
don't
don't
have
even know
enough of
what's
these.
happening in 2023, you know?
We'll fix that.
At the pleasure of the board, I mean, if I get one, we can do one at a time. I mean, I was just trying to consolidate. I mean,
No,
it's
and I see
entirely
that,
up to
but
you.
2023 is a little bit.
It's just the officers, he doesn't know what we're gonna decide, so we're really.
Do we
Right.
just sign up? for
It
them
is,
while
I mean,
they're
it
here?
matters.
It matters to the, I mean, because with Bob, with the phone company, you don't want that complaining in your back.
Right.
I know.
So you're talking, do you say signature, right?
You know, that's the only thing that's going in his file and it's hanging over his head.
And
'Cause
just
you may
the-
not think so, but he's still thinking, oh, I wonder what what the group is
Right.
gonna do.
And I'm sure he is, because.
Thank you.
Well, common sense, who knows?
Birthday.
So,
Same thing.
for the board's information as well, is that even even internal complaints, so if a lieutenant or sergeant writes up an officer, it remains in their file. We have a full documentation. If you pull up Joe Tuminelli, there's not gonna be much in there because that was an angel.
I was like, whoa, 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 I can feel it.
However, if you put,
Bring it in on a wheel.
if you pull up an officer's name, it'll give you anything that officer has done. If someone complained, if they were written up by a sergeant for no shiny
Being
shoes
late,
or whatever the
whatever.
case. The only time that it has to come before this board is if a citizen complains. So we would be here a little bit more if I had to bring every complaint to you. But the only time, and it's by law that I have to do this as well, is bring these citizen complaints. But for whoever asked that question of, do we keep documentation? The answer is yes, and it's in their file.
You know, we spoke, Michael, last year, and Mary, I think that you were part of it. There was something that had to do with where the complaints were going into the city, and there was some way we were gonna facilitate something different with the
So
complaint.
what?
Do you remember
it-
that?
It's always the police, essentially.
But it doesn't have to, that's
And
not what
it's
we're here
the-
for.
The code isn't the police.
That's what it was.
So for what it's worth, after that meeting, I did speak to the department directors, and I went and took the form that the police department uses and said to them, look, you need to have the same form, because right now, if you walk into the police department as a citizen and say, I want to make a complaint against any officer, they hand you this form and have you fill it out. The other departments weren't doing that,
That's what
and
it
as a
was.
result, it wasn't coming forward. But I've talked to some of the other directors, and they did have the form, and they were doing it, but when they tell the person, if you want to write a formal complaint that will be reviewed by a board about the person, the people back off and don't want to. They don't want to be involved, they don't want to. The thing is, I think in the police side of it, it arises to a civil liberties concept, and like, it's a criminal investigation, and the person, like, if somebody's late getting their permit, although they're frustrated that it's late, the person making the complaint doesn't want to arise to a public hearing and the whole thing, because they got their permit and they're moving on. But when someone feels like their civil liberties were impacted, that person does want to follow through on the complaint, and they do want a pound of flesh, so to speak. And it just, for whatever reason, we just aren't getting, people just won't fill out the form in the Public Works Department, or if someone has a complaint about a garbage man or whatever, they
But in
don't.
theory, that would come
Right.
here.
Right. That would if they filled out the form, and the form is in each department.
And
They
that's
just-
for the city
Any
people
employee
only.
of the
It's not
city.
like this store owner was very disgruntled and mean. That wouldn't come to this, correct? It would just be through the city, through the
It's gotta be a
garbage man,
city
through this,
employee.
through that. Okay.
Right, and so,
Right.
right now, there's a lady that came to a city commission meeting a few weeks ago, and is mad at Dave Dias and I.
How
And
could that be?
I know. I could understand the Dave Dias part.
Well, I was thinking the other way around.
But in any event, she has asked for the form, and I sent her the one for the police department, and she responded back, no, I want the one for other people. And I explained to her, no, it's the same form, it just says Stuart Police on it.
Can we
'cause that's where it
modify
came
that
from.
form so they're not
But
so
I
scared or
suspect that
threatened?
it'll be coming back, and you'll be having a hearing in the next 6 months or so.
Actually,
And it won't be a police officer that'll be the subject of it.
But I think that it should be changed to not
Just
the
city.
city
Well,
form.
I didn't have a blank
Oh,
form,
I
so I just did it to
Yeah.
get it out
To
the
scare
door.
her, make sure she didn't
No,
come.
I wanted her to have it
Just
that
scare
day, so she didn't say I
Right.
delayed.
Right.
Yeah, she does.
I
I'd like-
believe, I
right.
believe she was before the board
She didn't ever make it,
on the police officer.
because Dave Ross canceled that hearing.
Oh,
That's-
okay.
In any event, there's a very good chance you'll have one this year that's not
comes all the
a
time, right.
police officer.
But as the chief said when we started, that this is a good thing that we don't get together that often because
Yes, I mean, it's a
everything
positive
is
that we
going
don't see you.
well, in
Right,
theory.
right.
Right.
And it's funny too, because we had them a lot more
I'm glad you.
before we had chest cameras. And then when we had the chest cameras, we had a few that were, in the beginning, we had one time where it said the officer got out of his car and jerked me out of the car, and his belt scratched my door, and it was before they knew we had video. And then at the hearing, we had the video of the whole thing, and the officer didn't touch the car, didn't jerk anybody out of the car, walked up and said, sir, you're getting a ticket for speeding because you were going 25 miles over the speed limit or whatever. And it was just completely the opposite of what the report said. And back at the time, Dave Dias was the chief of police, and I said to Dave, I said, do you think the chest cameras are showing that the residents lie, or do you think that it's changing the behavior of the police?
I both.
And he said, right, that's what our conclusion was, that anybody knows they're being videotaped behaves differently. And the good news is that everybody seems to be behaving appropriately, and as a result, with the video and audio of 99% of these events, and there was video on at least one of these. We didn't produce it because
No.
there's nothing to show, but we could have if you requested it. But as a result, the ability to have this video of what actually occurred has made 90% of them go away, because there is no dispute about the facts. And, obviously, we have the ability to produce the video if it is necessary, and if you guys want to see the video. And I think in your packet,
It
we
did
mentioned that we could produce the video if you were interested.
Yeah, the one woman asked for the video in the complaint, and that's what I thought. Well, if she saw the video, she would know better.
And it's public record.
But the problem is,
Get it.
they produced the video, but the complaint's already made.
Yeah.
And that might be why she didn't come, but the fact is, she didn't withdraw the complaint either.
No.
So we have to go forward.
Do you
Oh,
have the
yes.
equipment to be able to automatically upload from the body cam as you drive into the station?
I think, well, I can tell you that if they dock it into their
They have to-
docking station, it will. I don't think we have the Wi-Fi to where it automatically docks in.
No.
Okay, yeah, that's more money.
Although the-
That's
I know it's
money.
more money, but.
I was gonna say, you can put that in the budget.
The company that we have the contract with
Excellent.
maintains all of the
Yes.
videos, I don't know if it's 30 or 60 days.
It depends on what the case is.
Well, I mean, like, no matter what, no case. Like, today's video from the police officers doesn't get deleted today.
Right.
I think it's 30 days, 100% of the video is maintained for 30 days, no matter what. So somebody could go back and request that video for any purpose for, I think it's 30, and it might even be 60.
It's actually 60 or 90. If it doesn't get categorized as a
But then it's
crime,
1 year if there's a category. Like,
Yeah.
Right.
if it becomes an event, they hold it for a year. But if an officer was just walking down the sidewalk and his
Right.
video camera was on,
it will drop
you're
off.
gonna hear that.
Maybe move it all to 1 year,
So it,
just in case.
for a year,
Yeah,
which
that's
is a
what I
long
was gonna
time.
It's
That
like
is
you
a
keep
long
a
time.
car
Ton
that, yeah.
Of data.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's
I mean, you've got that in the cloud, but still.
Public records nightmare.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I have one single person doing just video.
and our
Public
bandwidth
I'm surprised you only
data-
have one.
Yeah. And it's a lot for them. It keeps them busy.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm sure you have a lot more.
Okay,
Strike that gavel, please.
All right. Adjourned.
thank you all for coming in.
Thank you all for coming.